Vanilla WoW has no shortage of secrets and mysteries to behold. It's well known that vanilla developers had much greater ambitions for the game than they had the resources to create. There was a substantial amount of content removed or completely changed from the beta. Today, we'll take a look at some of the more interesting and mysterious bits of cut content, and we'll speculate what functions they could have served based on the information we have available. Ankh of Resurrection is an interesting item that has no class restriction, no mana cost, and acts exactly like a resurrection spell. Oddly enough, this item uses the same exact revive that priests get at level 10, which leads me to believe that this may have been something that shamans would have had to use to revive an NPC to get their ancestral spirit. Much like paladins and priests have a quest to get their resurrection spells. The Moro'gai was a faction of lost ones that was cut in WoW beta, but remnants of their faction made it into the release of vanilla, but they only have a few quests relating to NPCs. Magtor and Kamisha the Collector. What's interesting is that in a database they have several of these gems that summon Aurilla the Moro'gai, but there's not really any other information about what this is supposed to be about, but it's definitely unique, as I don't know of any NPC that takes several items like this to summon them. Another really cool thing that was cut from beta was that each of the individual types of weapons were only trainable by one particular NPC for each faction. Obviously, this would have been a real big pain in the butt if they kept it that way, so I'm really glad they did changes so that weapon masters do train multiple, and there's just one or two in each city instead of this debauchery. These guys were literally all over the entire world, whooping your ass. Garb of Thero-Shan is a set of gear that rogues were intended to get around the level 30 to the 40 range, and has quite a lot of useful stats on it for rogues. What's really interesting about this set of gear is no other class has a class-specific set of gear outside of dungeon and tier gear, which makes me wonder if they were planning to have more sets of gear for classes while leveling. Given the item level of the gear and the stats on it, I'd be willing to bet that this was originally a set of gear as a reward from quests from the Ravenhold faction, or perhaps it was some reputation vendor or something, as they have a repeatable quest to get their rep up, but doesn't serve any purpose. Brandon Abira is a NPC that never made out of beta that was a human hunter trainer. This homeboy was probably stationed in Goldshire along with the other class trainers around that level. The going theory is that humans were initially planned to be hunters, but because they wanted an equal amount of race and class combinations for each faction, so the human hunter probably got picked off. This theory is further supported by the fact that each faction has a total combination of 20 race and class combinations available to them. You can notice that the humans and trolls both have 6, dwarf, night elf, orc, and undead have 5, Tauren, gnome have 4. Hiram Jungle Dwarf is an interesting name. He's a dwarf that's a boar trainer, and I found several other NPCs similar to this guy at a database. There seems to be an NPC correlating to each of the type of pets that you can obtain as a hunter. It's safe to assume that they originally planned for you to have to go to each of these trainers to teach your pet skills, but instead decided that you needed to learn the skills of each creature by taming them, which makes perfect sense, and I like that design choice. Obviously, the hunter is also granted a beast training, which is kind of just the area you train your pets of all the learned abilities you have. The bent copper lockpicks item with not really much information on it, except that it opens difficulty 25 locks. This item does not require any skills or even a class or anything, so I wonder if this is a precursor to the silver skeleton key, well, the rest of the keys, but these take blacksmithing. I wonder if at some point any class was able to use these to open up boxes they could find. Your ears used to be very valuable. Originally, they wanted warriors to hack off body parts to sell on the black market, but decided that robbing their player base was the more ethical choice. It's possible this item is just a send-off to the Diablo franchise, because in D1 and D2, when you kill people in PvP, the player would drop one of their ears that you could loot. You used to have a bodyguard. Don't worry, baby.
Oh. No! I wanna touch your
moist cornbread.
I am going to commit suicide.
Brainwash is a really interesting spell that got removed from priests, and it was a 1.5 second cast with no cooldown that reduces the threat for everybody on the enemy target. Given the way that threat ended up working out on release, I don't see how this is even usable because it would reduce the threat for the tank as well. Maybe on enemies the tank didn't hit, this was intended to be used on, so it would fuck off on the DPS people and go onto the tank. I don't really know. It's safe to say that Brainwash was either one of two things. It turned into the spell Fade, or Mind Control. There's other spells in the database that go by Brainwash, but these are mind control effects used by NPCs. I find it interesting that they had a bronze lottery box in the beta, in addition to a heavy bronze lottery box, which would pull a level 20/25 item out of them. The only other item I could think that this may have turned into was the crazy grab bag, or possibly just the normal lockboxes you get from random mobs, but this sounds very much like they were encouraging lottery, which is something that they have in their EULA is not being allowed by players to do in-game, which is strange. Cannibal Hannibal? They really should have kept this guy in. Captain Obvious Boat Operator. What's really interesting on this is that there's a Captain Obvious Jr. in a database, but it doesn't show up until TBC beta. So, and he's an honor hold and has absolutely nothing to do with this guy. What a strange little family. I really liked all the wandering traders they had in the game of Vanilla. I don't think they did that in the future expansions, but it looks like this guy was cut from Nethergarde and was another one of those guys that might go around and sell you shit and travel. This poor cat was too sick to make it out of the beta. Onyxia scales were originally planned to be used for multiple items. There's evidence of this, such as a charged scale of Onyxia, which was an item made from enchanting that required a scale of Onyxia. There's also an unreleased scale breastplate, which we presume would have taken these charged scales. It's a pretty decent mail chest, but obviously, as we know it, this was just simplified to be just scale of Onyxias for the cloak, which you need in Blackwing Lair. It looks like alchemy used to be able to refine the scale, which would then be used by enchanting to charge it. Mind Rot is an extremely overpowered spell that I'm glad Priest never got. It was a debuff that would drain 360 mana from a target every 5 seconds for 30 seconds. This is well over 2,000 mana that would drain even a high-level character's mana to be very low, and this was taught at level 38. This thing's insane. I'm very glad it didn't make it. Obviously, Priest did get Mana Burn instead, which is a little bit more balanced, but still had its issues in TBC Arena. Dude, what the hell were they trying to do with Priest in beta? There was 2 other spells for Shadow Words that would make spellcast go much slower, much like the Warlock's equivalent, Curse of Tongues. And they also Shadow Word Fumble, which reduces the target's chance of hit by 75%. Revive and sugar! There's this cut quest that gives us a little bit more lore on Edwin Van Cleef. Apparently, Matthias Shaw knew this guy in childhood. Another neat thing that was probably cut was these Commendation. This looks like it could have been a system where you earned some type of rewards in zones. You could bring it to Marshall to get some rewards. In this case, there's one from Owen Force that would give you Lionum and gloves. The last on our list today, Cowardly Flight Potion was a really interesting item an alchemist used to be able to make. It was a potion that would apply a fear effect to you, but also increase your movement speed by 200%. As if you're trying to run away from something. This is obviously unreliable at worst and hysterical at best.